Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Time Crunch. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Micah Cawley. Micah is the Midwest Regional Key Account Sales Manager for I Haas, which is an elite hop supplier, among many other things, to the craft brewery market here in the US and beyond. And also a very interesting point about Micah is that he was the youngest ever mayor of the city of Yakama, where he lives today, at age 25, and served as mayor from 2010 to 2015. So did I get all that right, Micah?
You did, and I'm much older now.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. How's everything going?
It's going well, going well. Yakima's fighting the COVID-19 like everybody else and trying to get things figured out. But you have a lot of essential jobs in agriculture in Yakima. It's probably 65, 70% ag.
Wow.
So you have some challenges that come with that. But it rained a little bit last few days, but it's been pretty nice.
Cool. Well, appreciate you taking the time to drop some knowledge on us today. So the topic we're going to go through is one I'm really excited about. So Micah and I met at the Craft Brewers Conference in 2017. It was about 6 months after I joined Revolution, and our owner, when he knew I was going to be there, he told me, he gave me like two people that I had to meet when I was walking the showroom floor. And Micah was one of them, and Micah was the first person I introduced myself to because he was our key contact for our biggest top supplier. And at the time, Micah was, and Haas on the showroom floor, they were sharing with everybody a new hop that they were really excited about, and we were too. And it was, at the time, just had a number. It was HBC Experimental Hop number 438. That's the hop that has since been named Sabro and is probably, I'd say, like the hottest hop going in Chicago and probably a lot of other places where the small breweries are on the cutting edge of all the latest hops. And Revolution, we actually got in on it early, and we made a beer that we started in 2017 called Tropic Hero. And that beer featured Sabro as the primary hop in the dry hop, and it's got your tropical fruits like many new hops do, but it also just had this very unique coconut character as well as the cedar wood flavor that really kind of completed that tropical poolside hop profile that's got everybody geeking out over it. So sorry for the long-winded intro there, Micah, but thanks for coming to talk to us about Sabro, and I figured there was no better person to drop some history on us. So could you take us through how this hop came to be?
So Sabro, it deserves an intro that long because it's that complex and that unique. And it's one of those hops that in my time at I Haas, which has been 4 years since I left the mayor's office, something I've really come to love. I love coconut anyway. It's one of my favorite flavors, but you have this tropical citrus fruit, tangerine, woody, complex hop that's hard to create something like this. I mean, we all know Citra, Mosaic. We all know some of the big hops in IPA and in hazy, but Sabro is really one of those unique varieties that came out in the last couple of years and is a Neo-Mexicanus, has some heritage of that in it. And that's hard to breed into a hop or consistently breed into something where you can generate flavor that's going to come through for you every time you brew with that. And so Jason Peralt, actually a protege of Chuck Zimmerman, who's been around hop breeding for a long time in the Prosser area, had a Neo-Mexicanus hop in his field, and Jason was out there with it and noticed it was pollinating late in the season and did some crossing, and this was back in like 2004. So it took that long to breed this through a program, 14 years to get it from when it was first crossed to commercialization. So yeah. That's kind of the backstory.
And then at what point did it become even just like a numbered hop that some breweries, maybe just in small sample amounts, but could actually get their hands on to the point where there was a brewery that was besides your own that was making beers with it?
Well, it was before my time, and I believe Jason had identified the plant, had known the plant, and had given some to Natalie and Vinny from Russian River, which is a pretty big deal. They had a beer called Ron Mexico, and that kind of became an affectionate moniker for that hop. I don't know if it was ever pitched as the name, but it was kind of how they identified that hop and brought it to, from just a hop out in the field to commercial beer or in a beer that you'd recognize from a brewery. So a lot of these brewers that come out for harvest will engage with the experimental fields, the different hop vendors and hop suppliers, and try to find kind of the next big hop. So Sabro obviously stood out for its aroma in the field and then also in beer.
Got it. And then like what does it take to get this going? Like can you walk us through, like once you had it down and we're ready to kind of put investment behind this hop, can you kind of explain how that kind of even begins?
So I think when they found HBC 438, then it, started its life as that's the cultivar that I think it was crossed with YCR 123. And that's what became HBC 438, the pedigree. And so when you have a numbered hop, you have to scale that up. Is it a single hill? Is it a 7 hill? Is it a 30 hill plot? Is it become an acre? And what's the interest level from brewers? And as you know, the market kind of drives a lot of this. You have IPA being big, and much like Citra was not of interest to brewers for a long time, became of interest later in its life. So I think after you identify a hop through it's agronomically sound, it's got good yield, it's consistent, it's disease resistant, it's got all the traits that you want, then you can start showing it to brewers and preparing it for potential commercial release, or at least shopping it amongst those. And as you mentioned, you guys had got on this variety early. I had looked at some old contracts I saw, and it was before it had a name. So that's pretty cool that you're kind of on the cutting edge of taking a hop that, and it may not go anywhere potentially because you've got to have a market for this. So as a breeding company, you can create all the cool hops in the world, but the brewers have to want them and brew with them. And that's across all segments potentially to get it to a commercial scale.
Yeah. And so what are some of the methods that you have at your disposal to get brewers interested in something that only has a number at that point? Like I mentioned to everybody, how we met was when, you all had a beautiful, like a display would be an understatement, but you had a whole area of the showroom floor where you could show off test brews that you had made with the beer, and you got people walking around, and it was so easy to make conversation with yourself and other folks at the company. Like that's obviously a big one, but that's only, that's 1 week of the year. What else is there for ways to kind of get either the hops or sample beers in front of the people who would choose to use it in their beers?
So the one really neat thing about I Haas and the Barth Haas group in general is the investment into this pilot brewery we have in Yakama, and now we have one in Germany as well. And to come at brewing from the minds of brewers, and Virgil McDonald, who is our innovations brewmaster, has a 2.5 hectoliter Isa Huber brew house, fully automated. You can scale it up, and he started doing trials on hops. And I believe Michael Ferguson got some of HBC 438, obviously very unique in the field, and gave it to Virgil and said, "Would you brew with this and make a beer?" And he ended up brewing with it, going, "Wow, this has a crazy coconut aroma, tropical fruit. I'm going to try it again. Can you get me some more of that?" And that's always a good indication. And so as Virgil began making more pilot brews and having them in our tap room, so during harvest, when everybody comes through for their selection, they can taste different varieties or kind of what's in the pipeline. And Virgil had done some significant brewing with Sabro. And so you start showing it to different people that are coming through, having that conversation. Goes to CBC potentially for kind of introducing it to the market and tasting it there and having conversation around it. And so there's this kind of cycle of brewing with it, testing it out, and then having brewers like yourselves and others take it and experiment with it. And because a lot of times we're doing single hop brews, but we are branching out a little bit more lately.
Cool. So once you've decided that you've got the interest and you want to invest behind it, it's not just 1 year and you can just boom have as much as you want, right? It's a longer process than that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a market for it, and creating that market is always a challenge. But the brewers that drive the demand will thus have us hop suppliers and folks that hop breeding company expand that variety. And as you have more interest and more pilot brews and test brews, then you can scale that up. And HPC does a good job of managing that and making sure that you know, are getting behind the right varieties and you don't have too many of them. But there's significant investment in developing a new variety, from all the trellis and the acreage and the processing that has to go into that. And you want to make sure you pick the right one. And I think that's why Sabro being so unique was, you know, the right hop for this market and for what people want to experiment with and the flavors they desire in craft brewing today.
Cool. Do you know anything about where the name Sabro came from?
I do. I actually called around Jennifer Burns, who's the business operations manager at Haas and does a lot of our trademarking, is on the HBC. And it comes from sabroso, which is the Spanish word for like flavorful, delicious. And Jennifer is really big when she's talking to us about, you got to come up with a totally different word. And I'm sure you can relate to trademarking beers. You got to have a word that's not, you know, it's new. So
Yeah.
Sabro is totally itself and a unique new word that she came up with and brought to HBC, and they accepted that as the name. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm my neighbors up the street, Maplewood, just released a Sabro beer the other day, so I am sipping on that right now, and it is like coconut like you wouldn't believe. I know you would believe it, but
Yeah, you do have
yeah.
to try it to go, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to me because I feel like, you know, just listening to chatter among beer enthusiasts in the Chicago area, like everybody stops what they're doing if they're flicking on social media and they see Sabro in a beer. Like it's that popular here. But I feel like it wouldn't be that way without the name. Like if it was like a number, like people, so it just seems like there's probably because this was out for a good while. I think the whole first year that we used it as Tropic Hero, I don't think it had the name quite yet, I think. And but now the name and the notoriety is really catching on, and I got to imagine that then leads to, you know, fan feedback, which leads to brewers wanting more and more. I don't know if that's accurate. That's just kind of how I see it from my lens.
Yeah, I mean, hops as IPA has come on and craft beer has grown, and you have a lot of brew pubs and, you know, a lot more reach into the market, and the consumers have become very interested in the hops that go into the beer. And you're exactly right. A name like Sabro does stand out, but the hop is also unique. And Citra, Mosaic, Galaxy, some of these big hops that people know and are becoming, you know, the beer geeks have been aware of, or homebrewers have been aware of. And it's kind of cool to watch it take off. And I think branding in the name is very important in a variety. We have a hop Laurel that was HBC 291 that makes a great lager. It's a floral, it's incredibly spicy, but, you know, it didn't take off as much. And maybe that's part of the market, but it's still a great hop. And I don't know if it's the name or not, but I do think that plays for sure.
Gotcha. So then you mentioned the trademark process, which, you know, I think anyone can relate to how important that is because of all the, you talked about how many, you know, at least a decade and a half that has gone into getting this hop to this point and how important that is. So like now that you have it, it's a trademark hop, like, does that mean you're the only ones that can grow it? Can somebody like license it from you, or is it like your exclusive hop?
So the HBC manages its varieties, and
And
part of that's a
that's
quality.
hop breeding company, right?
Yeah, I should
Yep,
probably
yep,
explain that as
yeah.
well. The hop breeding company is a joint venture between Yakama Chief Ranches and John I Haas, and they each had breeding programs, and they brought their collective knowledge together in around 2003, I believe, and merged into this joint venture where they share information, and it's really collaborative and innovative. And the hop industry is pretty small in general, but to have this kind of these two big breeding powerhouses come together and start working together creates more innovation and probably a quicker timeline to market. But they would manage the variety and the quality of that. So you can't just have anybody grow it, or you can't buy it like a Cascade where you can get a rise up. Here, sorry, my dog's going crazy. You can't have, like Sabro just picked up at your local plant store and start growing it in your backyard and brewing with it. So, and part of that is so you can manage that quality, and do you have virus-free stock, plants, and what's going into that program. You have Cascade that could be grown in Michigan or Oregon or Washington. It's all going to be very different. So I think that trademarking, that management, and as you scale it up too, you want to license that to growers to grow, but HBC would still own the rootstock.
Got it. So if we fast forward now to today, what is like demand versus supply for this particular hop right now?
Sabro has been on a trajectory that I've seen, compared to Citra Mosaic, that it's had that much pull in the market. And it's always tough when you launch a new product, like anything that's popular, the iPhone, you sell out of it right away because it's got a lot of demand. Yep. And so then you have to scale it up very quickly. But with agriculture, you have some limitations on that. You can only grow so much. And then you have to kind of decide based on contracts and what you're seeing in the market, how much to scale up or grow. But it's for its short time in the market, it's definitely getting up there in, a few 100,000 pounds and potentially more, because it's making its way to brands like Tropic Hero and your neighborhood brew pub and all kinds of different places.
Is it something that, if the brewery was big enough in size for you all, is it something that can be, if somebody called right now and said they wanted to do to do a contract into the future, is it something is that even an option, or is it kind of, are you all booked on it?
No, I think it is an option, because the plans that led us here, pre-COVID, it's been on that trajectory. So you should be able to get some now, and especially coming out of the 2020 harvest, there has been a scale up of that variety. And we have a partnership with Yakama Valley Hops now, and they have access to a lot of the home brewers and supply a lot of the home brewers. And so as Sabro kind of grows on its own organically in the market and in brands, that you want to have it available for folks, because hey, here's a cool hop, but you can't contract it and you can't get it, but it's really cool. Yeah. So we've worked hard as not only HBC, but as John I Haas, to make sure it's available for our customers and for those in the marketplace, and those at Yakama Valley Hops and our distributing partners do have access to it. And it has been penetrating deeper into the market, because obviously you have this balance between contracting, scaling up, and at a large scale level at regional brewery or some of these smaller brew pubs. So we're trying to do our best to keep supply up with demand. I think this year we'll be in good shape.
Cool. Well, let's end on the future. Where do you see it in its lifespan? One thing I want to add is, like, when I started really like chasing after beers in 2013, Citra was around then, and if a beer had Citra in it, it was like, instantly sold out. Like, you could find them, but they were just here and gone. And still today, Citra's, as popular as ever, more popular than ever, and still a crucial hop in so many great IPAs. So, I mean, at the time I might have thought that, oh, well, this will not be cool by 2015, and sure, here we are 7 years later, and it's still, same with Mosaic, same with Galaxy. They're they've kind of maintained, they're not just like one hit wonders. These things stick around. So, like, do you see like a long runway for Sabro then?
I've heard of a number of breweries that kind of reformulated some flagship recipes and put Sabro in there. Didn't want to necessarily name names and such, but people that have really looked at this hop and found a place for it in their portfolio. I think the hazy market contributes to that. And then you talk about, like, outside of the U.S. market, a colleague of mine, Alfredo, he was over at Brazil Brau, and he got Best Launch and Show with Sabro. I think that Neo Mexicanus, that tropical fruit flavor, it fits in a market like Latin America. I know it's starting to take off in Canada. So I think that as brewers and and different innovators, and people get their hands on it and play with it. I mean, the one thing I love about these hops that you are dry hopping with is whether it's 50% Sabro and 50% Citra, or, you know, it plays well with other varieties, and you can get different nuances of flavor and different levels of flavor depending on the percentages you use and how you apply it. And so that's what's kind of fun too, is that it is powerful on its own and very unique, but it plays well with a lot of different styles and a lot of other hops. So I see it taking off, I guess, to answer your question, like a politician, fairly long. I see it taking off into the future and becoming up there with the Citra Mosaic. I see it reaching that status.
I agree. Cool. Well, are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh yes, this is my favorite part of the show.
Cool. Oh, one thing I want to add, there's a few professional wrestling related questions in there. I should have explained this at the beginning, but both Micah and I are big, longtime pro wrestling fans. So that's the reason for a couple of those. So here we go.
Now the pressure's on.
2 minutes, and I add 10 seconds for the lag of being on Zoom. So 2 minutes and 10 seconds on the clock. I will start when I finish reading the first question. All right, Micah, what past or present pro wrestler's entrance music would be most fitting for you?
Gold Dust.
Favorite airport to travel in and out of?
Minneapolis.
Which sea hop is the most underrated these days?
Chinook.
Name one thing you miss about being mayor.
Oh man, nothing.
Name a hop you think that could become the next Sabro in popularity.
I'm supposed to be rapid fire on this one. HBC 692.
I'm gonna write that down. What is the most sophisticated brewery operation you've ever seen?
Bell's Brewing.
What city was the rowdiest WWE crowd you've ever seen?
Chicago.
What single beer would you say you purchased the most of?
Oh man. Two Hearted.
Name a hop whose sales surpassed your expectation in the last year or two.
Cashmere.
What WWE wrestler have you gotten the most FaceTime with in your life?
Oh, a number of them. That's tough. Probably Dustin Rhodes.
Name a beer style you wish you could find more often.
Kolsch.
What's been a good source of motivation or energy for you during the pandemic?
The breweries I work with, watching their social media, watching how they're reacting to this, it's given me a lot of energy.
Cool. What's the most complicated topic to learn when you joined Haas?
Brewing, for sure.
What's something Yakama prides itself in besides agriculture?
Sunshine, 300 days.
Most memorable place you visited outside the US while working for Haas?
Tasmania.
Cool. What's a skill or hobby you're hoping to improve at?
Rapid question interviews.
Where did you get the majority? That's my fault. I stumbled over that one. We're out of time, but I'm going to ask you this one anyway. Where do you get the majority of your beer industry news?
New Brewer, the BA, Market Intel. And I'm supposed to have one, but as a former politician, I reserve the right to answer questions how I'd like.
Cool. Micah, thanks. This was fun. This was a new topic. This is probably the topic I knew the least about. And so I learned a ton. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all the good knowledge with us.
Hey, thank you, Doug, for doing this. It's really cool that you connect with a lot of different people in the industry and bring some things out to the world.
No problem. I have fun doing it. So, all right. Cheers, Micah. All the best to you and your crew.
Thanks, Doug.